The pendulum rule. In the world today, at every turn, we are forced to encounter direct or indirect material related to sexual relationships. In the transurfing model, this theme, just like many others, is approached from an unusual angle. Sex, or rather our relationship to sex, plays a hugely significant role in our personal lives, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. It does not matter whether a person has an active sex life or not. From time to time, everyone has flashes of thought that express their relationship to sex. There can be no neutral attitude to sex. Human nature will always reveal itself eventually. Some people's relationship to sex is expressed in annoyance, ridicule, and rejection. In others, it is transformed into intention. If the intention is left unrealized or is realized unsuccessfully, all sorts of complexes, or as expressed in transurfing terms, negative slides emerge in the human psyche. Sex is a topic that concerns most people, and many carry insecurities about it. Pendulums amplify these insecurities by convincing you, often through the media, that you're somehow flawed. But this illusion affects nearly everyone. You'd be surprised how many people feel the same way about themselves. If you think your sex life is challenging while everyone else's is perfect, remember this is a false image created by pendulums. If you filled a stadium with people and removed those who felt they had issues, only a handful would remain. Even those who boast about their romantic successes likely have hidden insecurities they won't admit even to themselves. We are not going to indulge in Freudian references here, as Freud could hardly have imagined the scale of sexomania that has developed today. But it is worth asking yourself why such a simple function perfected by nature should cause so many problems. The answer lies in an unexpected area connected to the concept of a flash mob. If you're unfamiliar, here's a simple explanation. Imagine a busy town square on a Sunday, just like this one. Everything seems normal until dozens of people suddenly open umbrellas pretending it's raining. Passers-by stop, confused, watching the rain people having fun. This kind of event is easily organized. Strangers agree online to meet at a specific time and place to perform a silly little act. Now, what happens during this? When a group shares a common thought or action, they create a pendulum. In this case, the flash mob's energy says, "Look at us with our umbrellas." Meanwhile, the confused onlookers wonder what's going on. The group's collective energy resonates and the pendulum absorbs it. A flash mob's pendulum is short-lived, flaring up briefly, then fading harmlessly. This example shows how pendulums form and operate, but unlike this harmless instance, longer-lasting pendulums can have more destructive effects. Another expression of this is the ash paradigm phenomenon. If you do not know exactly what this is, let me explain. Imagine you're in a small room with a few people all seated around a table. You're given a simple task. Compare a standard line to 3 other lines and say which one matches. Easy, right? The first few rounds go smoothly. Everyone agrees on the obvious answers, including you. But then something strange happens. The other participants, all confident and in unison, start giving obviously wrong answers. You're the last to respond. You know they're wrong. It's so clear, but still you feel yourself hesitant. You're thinking, what if I'm missing something? This is the ash paradigm in action. Unbeknownst to you, the other participants are actors, confederates in on the experiment, and their job is to intentionally give the wrong answers. The goal? To see if you'll conform to the group or stick to what you know is right. As the game plays out, you find yourself caught in a tug of war between your own perception and the pressure of the group. You feel the pull to agree to avoid the uneasy feeling of being the odd one out. Sometimes you cave, sometimes you don't, but the weight of the group's influence is quite palpable. It's as if the room itself becomes a kind of a pendulum swaying everyone's energy in the same direction, leaving you wondering whether you're in control or simply part of the swing. This simple yet profound scenario illustrates how group pressure can shape our perceptions and decisions. Just like in a flash mob where the energy of the group takes over, here, the harmless experiment reveals the powerful force of conformity in our everyday lives. Here's the continuation of this. In the doctor's waiting room experiment, A beep sounds and everyone stands up. After 3 beeps, the victim also starts standing too, even without knowing why. Everyone else is an actor, testing how quickly you'll conform to the group behavior. There's also an elevator scenario where you step in and face the door as usual, but when others, who are actors, turn to face the back wall, the target eventually follows suit, feeling the pressure to fit in. Both examples show how easily group pressure can influence behavior, pulling you from conformity without logic, driven by the sway of the pendulum rule, do as I do. What makes people emit energy in a specific direction? It requires a code of behavior and a breed type of thinking. There must be a set rule. Naturally, the rules are made up by people, not by the pendulum. Pendulums emerge spontaneously, generated by the rule that has been created, and are not capable of manifesting conscious intention. The pendulum rule is the worst and most harmful thing humanity has ever created, and it sounds like do as I do. Any codes of behavior or thinking comes down to following the pendulum rule. If you spend a little time observing life, you will see examples of this rule time and time again. Of course, it does not always cause harm. For example, a wave made by fans at a stadium creates a flash pendulum which feeds from the resonant energy, but no one is any worse for it. In a concert hall, the pendulum will be enthusiastically consuming the energy of the audience. There's no harm in this either. However, watch how performers sometimes behave on stage when they use the pendulum rule to stir up the audience. Higher, raise your arms, all together now. The audience obediently starts clapping, and the energy created, which would be tiny if it were emanated by just one individual, develops into a resonance, creating an invisible monster that hangs above the stage. If the pendulum did not swallow the energy, the artist would literally fly up into the air. As it is, the artist just gets a few crumbs that are left after the pendulum has devoured the rest. While the audience follows the rule, do as I do, the monster lives. Okay, so what? Nothing bad has happened after all. Flash mobs are harmless. This is true, but what does this have to do with sex? You will never guess. We started talking about sex and then moved on to flash mobs. So, what do they have in common? You probably think that it has something to do with energy, and in fact, while 2 people are having sex, a flash pendulum emerges that swallows the resonant energy. People in ancient times suspected or knew that a certain entity hangs above the act. In various cultures, this essence or entity, which is referred to in the transurfing model as a flash pendulum, is usually attributed an emotionally laden symbol such as an incubi and succubi, the amusement of Satan or astral parasites or jinn or spirits, as some followers of the occult practice believe that during this act, energy is radiated that attracts various representatives of the subtle planes that settle in and have their devilish orgy. Whatever people tell you, there is no need to be concerned because a flash pendulum cannot harm you. It simply feeds on the energy that you're spending anyway. But this is not the point that we're trying to make. The main thing that unites sex in its modern day form is the pendulum rule, do as I do. With the development of digital media, the pendulum rule has achieved total domination. At every step, the human psyche is constantly being subjected to invisible but highly efficient conditioning stereotypes of behavior and thinking. We're cautious to use the word zombify here, but essentially, this is where it's all going. The modern information and entertainment industry is based on one simple principle: watch how other people become successful and follow them. Let them be your example. What the industry is trying to demonstrate is the benchmark of success. You know this perfectly well already, but you may not have stopped to consider the magnitude of the propaganda's influence, which is sometimes obvious, but more often than not is subtle and gradual. A clear example of this is how people grow their social media accounts on TikTok, following the same trend, doing the same dance to the same music. In particular, this is the case with everything relating to intimacy. In this context, the stereotypes of what it should be like are very deeply rooted. Media on the theme demonstrate relationships which we are supposed to believe meet the necessary standards. We do not want to create the impression that we're talking about some sort of plot or intentional propaganda. No one actually sets themselves the goal of instilling certain patterns or molds. It happens automatically. The problem is that people always have room for doubt in their thoughts. Am I doing this right? There's always the need to compare, for success is relative. Hence, when a person witnesses someone else's success, they naturally tend to perceive it as a benchmark in their own life. Intimate relationships, and sex in particular, normally have their place in a tight, closed circle, and consequently, the need for confirmation that we are okay increases. If a person does not currently have a partner, or if they never had a partner, they start frantically searching for an example of how things should be. Of course, the media fulfills this need, offering all its audience a huge choice of models. This is how common stereotypes of how to do it and what your image should be emerge. For example, he is tough and macho, she is sultry and sexy. You're supposed to observe them and do what they do, and if you do not match the example, there must be something wrong with you. It is difficult to fathom the full destructiveness of this rule. You might think that we're overestimating the importance of this issue when we say that the pendulum rule is the worst and most harmful thing humanity has ever invented. And yet, not at all. We express ourselves quite modestly. The number of broken marriages is enormous, and the number of happy families that never were is perhaps even greater. The main reason for separation is ultimately a lack of fulfillment in the sexual relationship. Everything else is either a consequence of the lack of fulfillment or an excuse when people do not want to acknowledge the true cause of their problems. Lack of fulfillment occurs as a consequence of the fact that a couple follow the pendulum rule. They both know that in accordance with the model, they must do it like this and like that. The pendulum rule, do as I do, means change yourself and betray yourself. People try and adjust to the established standard, and as a result, they experience inner discomfort and dissatisfaction. When people have issues with sex, it often stems from trying to play a role. They choose a model they identify with and expect their partner to fit another predefined role. Over time, they adopt their role while projecting expectations onto their partner. The surprising part is that this role-playing often mirrors transurfing's detached observer style. They continuously compare themselves and their partner to an idealized standard, questioning if things are going as they should. Things go wrong because sex requires relaxation, freedom, and full presence. It's the one area where you must let go of roles completely. When sex feels natural, it's a game where you create your own rules without worrying about how others do it or how it should be done. Things become even more complex when the notions of love and sex are confused. It is odd to hear the expression, "let's make love." Wouldn't it be simpler to call a spade a spade? Sex is not love, and love is not sex. Are they compatible? Indeed, they are, but that does not change the fact that love is not sex and sex is not love. They can be combined and they can exist independently of one another, but the pendulum rule stops this from happening naturally. We would say that the nature of all problems experienced in sexual relationships is linked with the fact that in following the pendulum rule, people try to artificially combine love and sex. The result is a kind of awkward hybrid. If you forget about the rules and standard models, it is actually all very straightforward. Imagine a scale with 0 at the center of the baseline. The values to the left indicate affection and to the right, aggression. If the arrow shifts to the left, then it is love. If it shifts to the right, then it is sex. Whether you like it or not, sex is more about aggression than affection. Many people are shy or fearful when their devilish instincts are awakened, thinking that it's somehow unnatural. In reality, what happens is that two people meet and at first their behavior shows no signs of anything unusual. But then they get a predatory glint in their eyes and start doing things that do not fit with what exactly? Here, the pendulum rule comes into play. On the one hand, accepted notions of decency do exist which would be inappropriate to defy. On the other hand, within these boundaries of decency, it is impossible to take full pleasure from sex. We want both. In order to fit with the standard model of things, people start playing certain roles. Fearing their animal instincts, they water sex down with what they consider to be necessary ritual. This, in turn, evokes a certain amount of inhibition. When two people should be letting go of the reins, the pendulum rule will not allow them to. And the opposite is true. When the arrow moves far to the side of aggression, the need for reassurance arises. But do you love me though? On stage, both participants act like puppets tugging at strings of control they've tied themselves to. They struggle to pull the arrow their way when all they need to do is let go. By abandoning the pendulum's rules, they can let the arrow move freely, guided by the heart rather than the mind's expectations. Some might argue that this approach reduces us to the level of animals, but that's just the pendulum's rule at play. Who decides where humanity ends and animal instincts begin? The real issue isn't the line itself, but your ability to set your own rules rather than blindly following others. As a human, you have the right to define your own standards for decency and humanity. This message is especially for those struggling with issues around sex, particularly in loving relationships. To resolve these problems, simply let go of the arrow just as consciously as you've been clinging on to the pendulum's rules. Some people experience no problems in their sex life because they are direct, clear, and open. They know what they want from their relationship, communicate it honestly, and avoid confusion. Life becomes much simpler when both partners express their desires openly. Chances are your partner also has unspoken wishes. But what if one person's desires are unacceptable to the other? Firstly, it's important to remember the first principle of frailing. Let go of the intention to receive and replace it with the intention to give, and you will receive the very thing you let go of. This wonderful principle works every time, even if you do not always understand how. Secondly, you have to reject the pendulum rule totally and replace it with the rule of transurfing, which is be yourself and allow others to be themselves also. As you know, in order to feel fulfilled by a sexual relationship, you have to feel free and uninhibited. You cannot feel free if you're carrying excess potential in the form of complexes such as an inferiority complex. However much you try to relax, balance forces will not allow you to. In addition, dependent relationships generate polarization, which evokes the winds of balanced forces, which ruin everything. The transurfing rule instantly neutralizes polarization created by the dependent relationship. And so, even if you cannot get rid of your complexes, you can follow the transurfing rule, which will noticeably reduce the tension. To be yourself means accepting yourself in all your imperfection. Allowing another to be themselves means taking back your projection of your expectation of them. As a result, any situation which one person wants something another would find unacceptable is automatically resolved. We will repeat that all you need to do is reject the pendulum rule, do as I do, i.e. change yourself and betray yourself, replace it with the transurfing rule, be yourself and allow others to be themselves also, and then direct your intention in accordance with the first principle of frailing. Let go of the intention to receive and replace it with the intention to give, and you will receive the very thing you let go of. If both partners can do this, they should not experience any further problems in the relationship. We will leave more detailed explanations why this works to the psychologists, but it works. That is all. In more general sense, why should the pendulum need its rule? You can see that in the case of the flash pendulum, they feed on resonant energy, and so they require synchronized action. But what keeps more long-lasting pendulums going who do not require their adherents to act as one? Above all, the pendulum rule establishes behavior norms and types of thinking, i.e. standard models of what is considered normal. People do not understand that they're being offered vaporware or a surrogate of success. Someone else's success can never serve as an example in this sense of the model to be replicated. True success is only achieved by those who have the courage to break the rules and go their own way. A perfect example of this is featured in the documentary Love Over Money. A man who was set to inherit the billion-dollar Ben & Jerry's ice cream empire chose to pave his own path. Instead of focusing on sweet treats, he pursued his passion for showcasing how food can heal and found success and fame doing what he truly loved and was true to his heart. When you follow someone else's footsteps, you are sentenced to the eternal task of trying to catch the setting sun. Standards of success are a mirage, but people do not know, or perhaps they do not want to know, that the pendulum rule traps them in a web of illusion. Illusions are often sweeter, more convenient, and clearer than reality and the unknown. When someone feels that they don't meet societal standards, they often experience fear, inadequacy, and loneliness. What can they do? One option is rejection, building a wall to block out unattainable ideals. Another is to chase these models, following the pendulum rule, forcing themselves to conform and suppressing their true self. This only leads to frustration and dissatisfaction, prompting an endless cycle of trying to change. The wall of rejection, in turn, requires no less energy. It is very hard to maintain a defense field around you all the time when everywhere and at every step you're being bombarded with rules you are unable to observe. There is a way out of the labyrinth, though. The way out lies in refusing to follow the pendulum rule and walking your own path. Those who manage it acquire a unique quality that takes your breath away: inner freedom. Those who break the pendulum rule either become leaders or renegades. Some make their way to stardom, while others end up social outcasts. The difference between them is that the former know they have the right to break the pendulum rule, while the latter still have their doubts. Stars are born, but pendulums light them up. Those that dare to break out of line become new models of success. Pendulums will not put up with individuality. They see a rising star and have no other choice than to make it their favorite. Then a new rule is made. The line turns around and marches after a new star. Can you see what is happening? In order to break out of the line, you have to know how. If you fight against the figures in black, you will lose. In the battle against pendulums, you will always be defeated. The secret lies in leaving the line without a fight. You can walk away calmly, smiling, and waving goodbye to the figures in black, and then go your own way. They will do everything they can to force you back in line, but ultimately, there is not anything they can do if you do not enter in conflict with them. In order to fully understand this simple truth, you have to first reconsider your current worldview. In the world we live in today, many things have been turned on their head. In this sense, transurfing puts everything in its place and insists in resisting the pendulum rule. It is true that many people will be adverse to the idea that they're caught up in a matrix. Transurfing will not be of any interest to those who prefer their ego stay sleeping. We all receive the things we choose. An illusion is also a choice, and anyone who prefers to stay with the illusion has every right to do so. We're not here to push information or convince anyone. These principles are shared openly for anyone to explore, test, and either embrace or dismiss as they see fit. We're simply passing by saying, "Hey, did you know that there's something called transurfing reality?" "Really?" "Yep. That's where we're headed, but you can go where you like." That is all.